Welcome home, dearest Brava baby, to Do You Believe in Brava, the interview series where I, Talia Brava, personal growth leader of the next generation, meet with stars from across the spiritual personal world to try their practices, feel their vibe, and most importantly, ask them, do you believe in Brava, in Brava, in Brava, in Brava, in Brava, in Brava? I love you, Talia, Nada Brava. I recently had a name change. It's really hard for me to remember my brand. I love you, Talia, Nada Brava. One more inhaling and exhaling. Ah, Brava babies, infinitely streaming in. I love you, Talia Brava. Welcome to the first episode of Do You Believe in Brava Season 2 with the beautiful, the luminous, the very wise Aliza Kelly. Aliza, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because I always screw up an introduction for another human.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is a true delight. I'm all about the fourth wall and the third wall and fucking with all of the walls. So I feel like this is really important. My name is Aliza. I am an astrologer. I am an author. I'm a host. I'm definitely a Capricorn rising, but I'm also definitely a Leo sun, and I'm also definitely a Pisces moon. So I'm a very complex person who does a lot of stuff.
My darling, wouldn't you say the more you learn about astrology and 23andMe, the more you realize we all have all the elements happening inside of ourselves?
So real. Real.
It's like my whole life I thought I was just a Scorpio, and now I'm like, no, we are all so much more complicated than that. So, darling, I want to first talk to you about your journey, and you can be as broad or as, I've never done this before, but be as concise as you like in telling how did you come to this moment in time doing the work that you do now in the world?
It's, you know, I feel like it's no matter how many times I've tried to explain, I put so many people on the spot all day long when I'm recording my podcast to hear their genesis and understand their story. But when it comes to my own, I feel like it really depends on which angle I want to take. There's sort of the classic, like I was an art person. I was working in the art world, and then I was unhappy, and I realized that astrology was a really cool thing. I started an astrology dating app. From the astrology dating app, I started working with astrologers. I became an astrologer. But that's like such an abridged and bizarre sort of version and has a lot that's left out. Like, important details, I think, are the fact that for the majority of my life, I never felt like I was really ever doing the right thing. I always felt like there was something that I should be doing differently. I believed in myself very much, but I also did not know what that could possibly ever really look like in practicality. So I kind of just like gave up on thinking that I was going to be able to live a magical life, and was like, okay, I'll just make magical things happen out of the normal circumstances of reality. But magical people can't do that. So then I was like miserable, and then there was financial problems, and then there were like horrible drug problems and situations with horrible men, and just being a whole fucking mess of a person who is trying to live. And this was like a very long journey of trying to sort of know that I was always sort of magic, trying to figure out what that meant, trying to self-actualize, working against myself. And then finally in my very late 20s, these things starting to like click into place. The journey was realizing that everything that I had experienced and everything that I had seen as a failure had happened for a very specific reason. And that reason was so that I could ultimately understand how to help myself. And then by understanding how to help myself, which to me was through the language of astrology, it became sort of this, I came to realize that astrology is this tool for, yes, self-help, but also like beyond that, like going even further with one's perception of reality, going further with one's perception of self, understanding how someone fits into like just the greater collective interconnectivity of everything. And when you get sort of on that path and you sort of things start like, you know, aligning, so to speak, it's like you start to receive that feedback that you're doing the right thing, you know, that things are coming together. So through a series of things coming together and a lot of very sort of like lucky happenstance experiences, several years ago, it allowed me to become an astrologer full time, and here I am.
My darling, it's much more Dorothy than it is she put it on a vision board and 10 years later her financial plan came to life. So I love hearing that, like the step-by-step, getting that affirmation from whatever, like the universe source, like just seeing this feels right, now this feels right, and actually trusting that all the nexus points would come together at a certain point, which yes. I'm sure it's so hard when we don't have that model, but if we're creating a new world and a new way of being, we have to be strong without that model, unless you're following Talia Brava.
Yeah, I think that it's very challenging to feel like, you know that you want incredible things and you want to live this like magical experience. I keep referring to it as a magical experience because when I think back to like my childhood, I remember feeling like I was a witch, like I had so much power, like I could, you know, if I wanted something, I could make it happen. And then sort of just feeling like that couldn't be real. I have to, you know, I have to play by the rules more. Even if I'm rebelling, I'll rebel in the normal ways where people just like self-sabotage to rebel. And it really took a long time and a lot of work and a lot of therapy to figure out how to have enough confidence to feel confident doing something so weird with my life, because I was so scared. Even when I was like, I'm a badass, I don't play by the rules. Like I was so scared of like being judged for being an astrologer, or being judged or for like, you know, for not having a traditional system tell me, you know, if I was successful or if I wasn't successful. So yeah, I guess the reason that I took you up on the opportunity to really expand a little bit more on how I got where I am is because I do feel like when I share the abridged version, one, I disassociate, and two, that it's not really honest. You know, the real version is that there was a lot of fucking chaos that led to order, you know?
Yes. That's actually just, I mean, that is the fruit, the future truth that I speaketh, is like your mess is your mission. You really cannot, you have to do the internal work to do the external work with others. And so having gone through those places of like darkness and loss and confusion and living in the beliefs of others and losing your way all leads you to be able to be that truth teller now.
Yes.
So
very well said.
Thank you, my darling. I try hard. So it's like listening is a new thing for me, just so you know. So if I'm not listening well, if you see my eyes glaze over, just go. I'm working on it. I'm a recovering narcissist. Recently recovering. Before I thought it was a good thing, and now that I'm like, oh no, the matrix is crumbling. It's not so good to be a narcissist. So, darling, I want to hear, because we know like the old patterns of mind can still like have little resonance. What is a voice or a belief or a thought that comes up where you're like, you know what, that's a belief I used to hold that doesn't serve me anymore? Is there one of those that pops up and maybe has recently popped up for you?
That's a great question. I think that, I mean, what really comes to mind right now, and in the, you know, against the backdrop of this moment where, you know, as a white person, wanting to very aggressively sort of reconsider the privilege that I've had in my life, because I've had a hard life, but not ever because of the color of my skin. I think that I've recently been reconsidering what red flags are and how privilege plays a role in those a lot of the time too. We talk about like red flags in dating a lot. And as an astrologer, I obviously talk to a lot of my clients about like, you know, if about their dating experiences, about things people do or don't do, and whether, is that a red flag? Is that not a red flag? But I had never really considered how privilege could also play a role in that. And, if somebody is living at home, let's say, with their parents at, 30, 35, me as like a white woman says red flag, doesn't have his life together. But sort of imagining the fact that actually there's so much more that I don't know about what could be going on in this other person's experience, regardless of the color of their race, but also including that. It's different to talk to people who come from different backgrounds, and who have had different experiences and who have different responsibilities and obligations. So I think that allowing myself to see how, even as an astrologer, my perception of reality is still through my own lens and my own eyes. And my interpretation is always going to be my interpretation relative to the language and the scope of what I understand, and giving myself permission to recognize that there's biases in that. And then also giving myself permission to sort of, as much as I can, listen as well and try to unlearn those biases.
That's beautiful. And I think that this actually speaks to a broader truth in the spiritual personal growth world. We talk so much about personal empowerment, and I feel like at certain extremes, there is an empathy there. So actually having the empathy for the whole of someone's lived experience, rather than imposing like you said, like imposing like that's a red flag because this person. So, and I also think this collective being home, as much as it's been like really good for my personal brand, it's also been really dismantling of it. So looking at this collective, the collective shadow has shown up in such a strong way because people are actually sitting with themselves for the first time maybe ever in their lives.
Yeah. And like, where are they sitting? Like people are in such different environments. Home means so many different things to so many different people. And it's interesting because the concept of home shows up in astrology through a number of different archetypes and symbols. Cancer represents the home, the moon represents the home, the fourth house represents the home, Vesta is the hearth. Like there's a lot of symbolism and archetypes and iconography surrounding the concept of what it means to be home. But what is home? Home is sometimes a really toxic place. Sometimes home is your family's mansion that you don't want to acknowledge that they have. Sometimes home is a very, weird transient spot that you don't feel like you belong in. So being home, even though we all know that people are spending more time at home, we also have to be so sensitive to the fact that like home, might be a dictionary definition of home, but on an emotional level, it's going to elicit such different responses to so many different people.
Yes, that's so real. So with this moment of like so much information and so much varied information, like if I were to look at my Instagram feed right now, I'd be like, wear a mask, COVID is a conspiracy, like Trump is like, it's all fake videos of him, and like, no, he's actually like a total bigot. And for me, it's, as someone who's like not thoughtful, like I'm not a brain person really. I'm like a person, I'm like about myself, but I'm not like really a great thinker, to be honest. So I have to like channel shit. How do you know truth for you? What do you know is true, and what's your litmus test to know this is true?
Well, Talia, I think that that's an amazing question. And I'm very glad that you brought it up as a spiritual person yourself, in channeling messages versus in receiving downloads from the news. So I was not aware of how adjacent the work that I do is to conspiracy theories. Now, I love fucking with a good Roswell story. I'll go to Area 51 with the rest of them, but not during a pandemic when people are dying and people are sick and people need to stay home and protect each other.
Yeah.
So what I have found to be very alarming is how many of my sort of spiritual adjacent colleagues sort of have started to use their platforms to only channel emotional responses and not to look at information. Data is complicated and it's patriarchal and it's confusing and there's a lot of bullshit out there, but we have to emotionally, spiritually, intellectually come up with a hierarchy of what really matters. When people are dying, that takes precedent over everything else. You know, when people are sick and ill, we have to sort of say, okay, we can talk about Epstein and Bill Gates and 5G later, but right now, like, we need to protect each other because we don't know why people are dying maybe like they are, but we know that they are. So
I mean, I can't see ghosts, but I believe in them and I believe in germs too. So
yes.
I can't see germs, I can't see ghosts. I think that's a really smart distinction, just to note it, just to be checking oneself over, like, there are many levels of reality, and like, I think it is a time for us all to be checking our values and leading from them first, because otherwise you're fucking lost right now. Like, if you're not crystal clear on like what matters to you, and what I'm hearing is like human life.
That's number one, I would say.
And I think those who are really feeling the overwhelm of this moment are those who haven't taken the time to really just sit with themselves and think, what does my heart believe? What do I feel is most important? Because if we look to seeking validation from the external and our values are shifted by that, we can go in a million directions based on like whatever algorithm is showing up.
Well, I think that it's a really fine line of the micro and the macro right now, because obviously things are, we need to sort of work individually, but the working on the individual level is actually working on the collective level of how can my individual contributions be positive, make a positive impact, or could they make a negative impact on the collective societal experience? Mm-hmm. Each person's individual choices play a big role right now. So even though we might all be sort of sequestered and feeling like we have to individually self-actualize, we need to do that without hurting and compromising other people along the way.
And I think it's a beautiful distinction too, because I feel like the 70s idea of like, you create your own reality was translated like by 80s babies into like, make that money for yourself, when really like, you create your own reality. So that's a great responsibility.
Right.
Your experience is going to affect your neighbor.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, darling, don't you ever feel like you just want to like educate your fam? I mean, it's like, I have to like stop myself. Stop. I'm not here to teach you. I love the quote. I'm learning this stuff. I'm not here to teach you. I'm here to love you. Love will teach you. So I'm just trying to love more.
Beautiful.
I'm really working on it, darling. It's new for me. If you met me a week ago, I was a different person, believe. So have you ever heard of the legend of Cassandra?
Oh my God, no.
Okay, the legend of Cassandra so it's like the first sexual harassment case. Like, Zeus tried to sleep with Cassandra. She was like, no, boo. And then he cursed her to always see the truth, but have no one believe her. So as an astrologer, and you just posted something about how, it's so frustrating when people just like write off astrology because it's confusing. Do you ever feel that energy of, oh my gosh, I see so much. I know so much right now from this vantage point, and it's not being heard? And what's your relationship with that?
Well, first of all, I love some Greek mythology. Zeus was a real fucking Weinstein. Mm. He was a real fucking nightmare. I felt that a lot more when I was younger, when I was starting Align. Oh my gosh, like, what was it? 7 years ago now. I was trying to raise venture capital funds because I thought that was what people do when you start a company. it's what a lot of people do.
Yeah.
But not someone starting an astrology company in 2014.
Yeah, it works for the market. If you're like,
Yes.
oh, my God, honey, they're like, here you go.
Yeah, right. When you're like Evan Spiegeltown or whatever his name is of Snapchat, it works very well. But when you are a 24-year-old woman trying to start an astrology dating app, it does not work as well, because the people who are holding on to the resources really did not want to reallocate them and to invest in an astrology app, because they did not think that astrology was going to be relevant, and that it was not a monetizable or a good financial opportunity. So that was really frustrating. And I definitely still have a chip on my shoulder about that, because a lot of the companies or a lot of the venture capital companies funds that we went to in 2014 ended up investing in companies in 2015 and 2016. It was just that we were there first. So they were like, oh, this isn't a thing. And then when they heard it again and again, they were like, ooh, here's $2 million. No
There's
problem.
never a party at the leading edge of thought. Never a party.
So other than that though, now I just have fun with it. Like now, I mean, I love fucking with people, and I love when people try to fuck with me to an extent that is not an invitation for people to troll me. I like, for instance, being at a dinner party. When was the last? I never go to dinner parties, even before coronavirus. Nobody ever invited me. But in an imaginary world, where I have friends who throw dinner parties, I would love the idea of like there being like a banker there, and he's like gets a little too drunk, and then he's like, Aliza, like, you're an astrologer, like, could you tell me about myself? And then I call him out for wanting to fuck his sister. Like, those are the types of things that I would like to do. But
you know what? Those are that's like the little fire that we all need. And that's the Brava. So like I channeled a new god, Nada, who's the dismantler of the hyperego. Brava is like the narcissistic sociopath that I channel, but sometimes you need a little Brava fire, like just to be like, ooh, it feels kind of good to like dig into that part of me that's like competitive and is like, meh, but like for the good of the collective ultimately.
Yes. I mean, I'm a Leo, I'm a fire person. Like I definitely would not, I don't think that astrologer is definitely not for, or being an astrologer, you need to have sort of a thick skin, you know, like
you gotta be able to look at the darkness.
So, yeah. And you also need to be able to like, you know, sort of have very uncomfortable conversations with people.
Otherwise they're just paying you to blow smoke up their ass. Like for me, Cutie, is there, if the world could hear something that you feel, they might reject, but you're like, in integrity, I do feel the astrology is saying this. Is there one message that you're seeing right now come clear for the collective in this moment?
Well, in 2019, I started to talk about the astrology of 2020. And I obviously, you know, you don't have to be a brilliant, groundbreaking astrologer to see that 2020 astrology was insane. You know, you could, oh, hello, Lucy. You can learn like, you know, the astrology of 2020, the planets, the way they're making connections, unprecedented, never in our lifetime, hasn't happened since the Reformation in the 1500s, crazy. So I started saying like 2020, I have been studying 2020 since I started working with astrology a million years ago. So like I have been sort of anticipating this year, but when 2020 started happening and it just started like slamming through, fucking impeachment, maybe a World War III with Iran.
Slamming is the word. I feel like I'm getting fucked by Mitt Romney on a roller coaster, and it's not.
Wow.
It's just like,
yikes! No, nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that. You like
no.
in the inside level, not maybe policy wise. Okay, so you're seeing it coming.
So yeah, so like when I just decided that, I mean, why not just start saying things? You know, like why be vague about it? Like I'm just gonna say what I see.
Yeah.
And then there's like, well, there was an article that came out in the New York Times like maybe 6 weeks ago about, I don't know who hurt this writer, but she was like, where were astrologers in predicting 2020?
I know, I saw that too.
Like,
I named one astrologer. I'm like, every other astrologer I've been listening to is totally naming this.
I know. Like, I mean, I don't know who's right here. Like, I have been, and I've almost like, I practically have like thrown my like credibility on the line in doing so, because obviously it's a ballsy thing to make big fucking predictions.
Yeah.
But then after I did it and I kind of broke the seal, so to speak, I was like, fuck it, I might as well just keep going. So now, a few weeks ago, I was like, okay, the second wave is coming of coronavirus. Like, please listen. Everybody was like, where's the good news? Like, why are you saying, like, fear mongering? And I'm like, I hope this is helpful. Like, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to tell you what's happening from my vantage so that you can make good choices. I'm not saying something's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not saying an asteroid's hitting the earth.
That's the strength of knowing your fucking heart and your integrity and your values, so that you can stand up against that without needing to defend yourself. Because it's like, hey, this is me. I know that I'm doing good work. I'm not asking for every single Instagrammer in the world to believe that I'm doing good work. I know this is the right work to do.
Yeah. And like, for one person who was maybe thinking like, oh, should I go and hang out with my friends and lick their faces, even though my one person is like getting over a little cold, like, and maybe they saw that there is going to be a resurgence. Like, maybe one person who was going to get sick is not sick and didn't get someone else sick. I feel like if people have the information, hopefully they can use that to make thoughtful choices.
So Carl Jung does say, R.I.P. He speaks to me through little memes that I got on the phone. He said that the line between good and evil rides between each man. And I think that a line that, as practitioners of any sort of healing work, that line can be crossed whenever we take more power than we take power away from someone. So do you ever find yourself in a situation where someone is projecting too much power onto you as their astrologer or their guide? And how do you work with that?
It's a good question. Well, I think that one of the things we need to be very mindful of in the next 2 years are cults. I think that cults, which I love cult aesthetic. I always have. The shoes, the frocks, like, I'm all about it.
Thank you, darling.
But we need to make sure that we are being very aware of who's sharing information, what they're sharing. Traumatized people like to hang out with other traumatized people. And right now we're all being traumatized through this experience. So we're all going to be trying to find our co-traumatized folk. And if certain people are exploiting that situation, it is definitely a ripe climate for some serious cult stuff. So I think that one of the ways that I make sure that people don't, I'm not interested in starting a cult. I have too much on my calendar already.
Yeah, it's annoying to have followers. Like my cult babies, they're like, what should I eat this morning? You don't want that.
No, it's just, it's gross. It gets icky.
Make your own choices. Yeah. I get it. It's a lot of responsibility.
I think that, I really feel like one of the main distinguishing aspects of any bad leader, cult leader, otherwise, is discouraging curiosity. Is someone who shames people for questioning things, or makes this sort of like us and them mentality, or like who creates extremism, and then who then tries to like scapegoat, divert the blame, which a lot of what these people, astrology adjacent people, I'm worried are starting to try to do, because that's like the first step is create a conspiracy. Step 2 is then make everyone who fucking that Sandra Bullock movie, Bird Box, like make everyone who then feels like they don't see it then like evil.
Yes.
And create like those who are woke and those who are not woke, and then the woke people turn out to be zombies, and like that's crazy.
And honestly, Aliza, I can't tell you how quickly, and I'm so grateful that Nada's here, because Brava is all about this. Brava's like only Brava baby content. You just must devote to me exclusively, and if you doubt me, you've betrayed me. But thankfully, Nada, Destroyer of Brava, has come in here, so she's channeling through me right now, through my vessel. And I can't tell you how I actually am feeling like this group hypnosis and different mind. Like, we're very much living through our Instagram feeds. Like, let's be real, we're all fucking addicted and we're home. But I am seeing like this almost cult-like mindset in each of the different communities that I have on the internet. And this is so much finger pointing, which is all projection, which is all scapegoating each other. And so it's already fucking happening. And whether your cult is like, this media outlet or this astrologer, to me, it's all the same fucking thing, because
you're right.
You're letting go of your free thought. And that's,
yes.
I'm learning from Nada is not a good thing to do, because people are so afraid, and that's why I just keep putting out the message in the last few days, like white savior that I'm attempting to be, is like, I just keep putting out the message, just say what you fucking think. And like, if somebody has to use you as a psychological projection and fucking hate you for a moment, that's their process. Just say what you believe, because if we let that go, we're lost.
Yeah, I think that it's, living on Instagram, which is, you're right, where we all live now. That's more, maybe that's the working definition of home. Maybe social media is home now. We have to make those swaps that home is not a space. It's like a digital landscape. And I think we have to be very careful with the way that who we let into our homes, if social media is home.
Yes. Thank you. That's really a very insightful answer. And I did hear you say that just to validate. Astrology is real. I heard you say that for a while. Like, watch out for cults. Like, there's a right moment for that kind of pop up. Why do you think you're here now in this plane incarnate in this particularly strange moment?
Oh, man. I'm not sure if I'm going to know that until, I don't think I know that right now. But
humble answer.
But I think that it's just extraordinary that everyone who is alive right now really has to be. And I think, and everyone who dies also, it has to die, but like, even the process of them leaving at this moment, I think, is also monumental too. Mm-hmm. I often think about the fact that David Bowie and Prince died in 2016 in the first half of that year. For some reason, I think about it quite often. Like, they never saw the Trump thing. Like, it just like, there are some people who just sort of dipped out before shit happened.
And those, I feel like when I think of their energy, it's like all freedom of expression.
Yes. Leonard Cohen also. Like, there's
close. That was like Leonard.
So close.
Beautiful daddy, mean evil daddy.
I know.
Like,
yeah, all the daddies. I spend a lot of time thinking about daddies. Yeah. And yes, I think that but if we're here right now, this is recorded. I hope that we still are alive after it comes out. But for those who are going to be watching it, they're alive. And like, anyone who's alive and is consciously here interacting with things is like here very specifically for a reason, because it's not everybody is born during 2020, like living during 2020. This is a very weird time.
So many, I think, feel like they're just going to bow out and let this happen because what would I have to share? And that's just sad lack of confidence that I'm seeing in my community members, of like really not knowing and understanding that even their presence is a beautiful thing.
Yes. I mean, I think that there are going to, time is just this most magical and extraordinary thing. And as we're seeing, time is very weird now that time has shifted for everybody. At first it was moving very slowly. Now it's moving so fast, and we don't know what days of the week are. They're arbitrary, like everything is arbitrary, but things are not always, there's no such thing as just like overnight success, either pertaining to your career or pertaining to like identity. Things take time to build. Like, did you know Jude Law, his mother was like a stage mother? Like, every single celebrity had like stage parents behind them.
It's a lineage.
Yeah.
It's like
and like
progress through the generation.
Yes. And like, if you start at 5 years old, of course, by the time you're like 25, you're going to be famous. It's because it took fucking 20 years. Like, things take time, and it might not seem like they do from sort of our perspective when suddenly someone or something just emerges. But like, whether we're talking about celebrity culture or we're talking about like systemic racism, like, shit takes time.
Yes.
It's like slow and long, and Trump is very old, you know?
Yes. Even to turn back to your story, our development takes time, and it's also in this context of the whole like collective. So you can have a beautiful message and no one can hear it until you're dead for 20 years. Like that could also happen, right? So on my little Instagram life, like I'll put up a video and then I'm like, you know what? If no one likes it, they'll like it in 10 years. Like, you have to remind yourself that like we have to just speak from our heart, and like we can't control how it's received and when, and how it's going to shift the dialogue or not.
Yes. But I do think that one must be very careful about what they put out into the world, because you can't take things back.
This is true.
So if you're speaking your heart, make sure your heart is pure.
Mm-hmm. And that's that check-in. That's why Nada came in, because I was just all about trying to get approval. So before we come to a close, I'm curious, has there been a time when a belief has like radically shifted? And if so, can you tell us about that?
Like any belief, or an astrology belief,
like
or
anything that comes to mind where it was like sort of something that maybe was like about the way you saw the world and the way you lived, and if there was any moment where a big belief shift happened.
Well, I think that in order for me to have sort of become who I am today, and I'm quite happy with who I am today, I had to actually sort of recognize that everything I thought was wrong and a lie. There's a huge siren going by, so I'm just going to pause for a second.
Kind of perfect. Like, everything's a lie.
Yeah, I mean, I had to go through the process of like realizing that the infrastructure that I thought was real wasn't real, and you know what, the things that I thought, you know, on a personal level, like certain beliefs I had about my mother weren't true, certain beliefs I had about my father weren't true. Then I had to hate them, you know, and be like, how dare you have created these lies, and I don't know anything. And then I had to find forgiveness for everybody, including the forgiveness for myself, for not knowing, for knowing and fucking up, for knowing and fucking up again and again. And then just realizing that like at any moment you can really start over. And there's not really any reason to, you know, if we're going to build a life on something, on an idea or on a concept, on a series of values, we want to make sure that where those came from is structurally sound. Mm-hmm. Because if we start scaling on something that is not built on truths, then we can build it very high, but it's going to end up collapsing. Mm. So I think that for me, at least, you know, the process of sort of like breaking everything, just like knocking all the Jenga pieces off in order to realize like Jenga is actually a fucking game and I can't live in a Jenga tower, allowed me to then start over.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful invitation, especially as so many people are grappling with that very experience right now, which is, I think, I've been speaking a lot about like speak your heart, but a lot of people really don't know where their heart is right now, and that's okay. It's okay to be searching for it and searching for what feels true as people are grappling with the big belief shifts since the beginning of this whole 2020 experience.
Yeah, I think that it's really important to learn how to be uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And it's something that we avoid like with all of our might. But at the end of the day, it's like something that is truly the most, that's the only growth is going to only come from being uncomfortable.
1000%. And sometimes life hits you with like a disease or, you know, a breakup to make you feel uncomfortable. Or sometimes you choose it by saying, I'm going to sit and meditate, or I'm going to have this difficult conversation. So it's like we can choose to be uncomfortable or life can make us uncomfortable, but that's where the growth happens. I believe in that too.
Yes.
So darling, I have one final question for you.
I have one final answer.
Brava is always here. And so as much as Nada is trying to destroy her, Brava really needs to hear one truth from you. Speak your honesty. You don't have to lie. Do you believe in Brava?
Of course.
Oh, my darling. Welcome home. Welcome home. This is a good community, I promise.
I'm happy to be here.
Well, darling, how can people follow you, get obsessed with you, stand over you without becoming a cult follower?
Yes, totally welcome to do that. You can follow me on all of the social medias, including TikTok, which I have not uploaded to for 2 months, on at Aliza Kelly, and it's ALIZA KELLY, and then that's also my website. So then added.com, and that's that.
I love it. Also, listen to your podcast. It's very good.
Oh yes, and I do have a podcast. It's called Stars Like Us. And thank you. I think it's very good too, but I'm biased.
Well, you know what? If anything, let's make content that we, when we incarnate next, would be excited to discover.
Totally.
Because I'd be discovering yours, and I'd be discovering mine. And, you know, I have one girlfriend who always like laughs at my posts, and that's all I care about.
That's it. That's all that matters.
If it resonates, it resonates. It could be a crowd or it could be one person.
Yes. All you need is one.
I love you so much. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.